A little more than a dozen headstones on Kinderhook's Rothermel Avenue across from the baseball field are what's left of what some call a slave cemetery. Village historian Ruth Pawanka says there's more to this story.
Some of the people who were first buried here undoubtedly were slaves, but of course later on they certainly weren't.
Most of these headstones were for children, but Pawanka says over 500 slaves and free African Americans are likely buried in what is actually the Persons of Color Cemetery at Kinderhook. Villager Warren Applegate says it likely survived the last 200 years because of 19th century Irish businessman and slave owner John Rogers. He owned this land and other property, including a house around the corner.
He was perhaps a little sympathetic with other minority groups which had been persecuted.
Pawanka recently found Rogers' will, which in 1815 designated this quarter acre of a land as a cemetery for, quote, persons of color.
I don't think you're going to find very many cemeteries which were established by a white person for persons of color in this particular historic time.
New York State and the National Park Service recently declared the cemetery a state and national historic site. For years, though, it was an afterthought.
I played Little League here in the early 50s, and it was sumacs and weeds where the cemetery is.
Mayor Jim Dunham says the village now maintains the burial ground. Applegate and Pawanka are part of a group who are on a mission to preserve it. An upcoming rededication ceremony at this cemetery will shed light on a taboo part of history in Kinderhook, once home to one of the state's largest rural slave populations.
Slavery was a fact of Kinderhook, and something we have to acknowledge. It was a fact. I know I have relatives that lived here at that time, and I know they did have slaves.
Nia Ham, News Channel 13 Today.